Good morning, everybody. This is Module 11. We are going to go through and learn what are some of the different brain imaging techniques that are used for us to understand the different parts and functions of the brain and how they're affecting our behaviors. And then we're actually going to start looking at some of the brain parts. I have a few little memory aids to try to help you remember those parts, but we will be doing some activities in class to help us remember these different parts of the brain. So this is going to be more of an introduction to it. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so this is Module 11. We got to go back to the beginning. This is not the perfect video. All right. So we are going to start with first understanding that when we are studying the brain, there are two ways we can lesion a part of the brain, and that is where you actually remove a small portion, or maybe if it was a large surgery, a large portion of brain tissue. And they can study that portion and also just see how it affects you after that particular part of the brain has been removed. And then stimulation is where we would actually use, electrodes, and we would activate certain parts of the brain and see how you respond with your behaviors, or maybe actively talking about your thoughts. All right, so these are some of the brain imaging techniques. And the EEG is where you put electrodes. And it's, basically you'll see, well, they'll have the little electrodes set up on their brain, and they will measure, it's on your scalp, and they will measure your brain activity. We use this a lot for studying sleep. So we can actually, when you hear about different stages of sleep and the waves that they emit, that comes from the EEG. The MEG is a magnetic field looking at brain's natural electrical activity. This is actually a new one that we just kind of put on the slides this year, so we're not going to worry about too much about that one. But the CT or CAT, the CAT scan, those are X-rays. All right, so one thing with the CT or the CAT scan is when we say X-ray, it's more looking at the anatomy, the anatomical parts of the brain. So meaning like where you could actually see what the brain looks like. So if there is a tumor or something, it's actually looking at the structures of the brain. The PET scan is looking at brain activity that detects where the radioactive glucose goes when you perform a task. So you would actually ingest something, and then when you ingest it, and then they ask you to do different activities, when they look through the PET scan, they can see, it literally creates these like color visual images of where the activity is during that particular task. And I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. The MRI is, it's another, it's a little bit more sophisticated way. It's a technique that uses magnetic fields and radio waves to produce computer-generated images. So once again, it is looking at the anatomy, and it's a little bit more sophisticated than the CAT scan. You probably hear about people having MRIs a lot, not just with the brain, but you might have it with other parts, like if you've been injured, like where you have a knee injury or something like that. The fMRI is looking at blood flow and brain activity, and it will take like successive pictures of your brain, and it can actually kind of, at the same time, you can look at anatomical differences, like what's actually happening, how the brain looks as in a tissue component, in addition to understanding what's happening when you are doing different tasks, so seeing your activity as well. So this is a CT scan that will show you the actual anatomy of the brain, and like the MRI and the fMRI. And this is brain functioning, which is, this is actually an fMRI that you see in this picture here. And it's showing, see how there's all these different pictures of the brain, like they're just taking them really quickly. So it can actually show changes that are occurring while you're doing different tasks, but it also can show the structures of the brain. All right, so this is a great little like graphic organizer to kind of look at, and it gives you more examples of when we might actually use these different brain imaging techniques. I would highly recommend reading through them because you'll probably see something similar to that on the AP exam or on a test. All right. Next. Which of the following scanning techniques measures glucose consumption as an indicator of brain activity? So if you remember which one had to do with the blood glucose. That is the PET scan. All right, so now we're going to actually go through some of the parts of the brain, and we like to start from the bottom and then we work our way up. And when we say we like to start from the bottom, we literally, like evolutionarily speaking, when it comes to how our brain has evolved over thousands of years, I want to say millions, that it is actually evolved where we used to just have more simple brain functioning. And we know that other animals have similar brain stems or these lower brain structures. So we are going to start here with the medulla. The medulla has to do with breathing and heartbeat, as I was hesitating for a second. Let me cough. One quick way that I try to remember the medulla having to do with breathing and heartbeat is I like to think of Medusa. And Medusa is that mythical character that she has like the snake hair. And just because her name's Medusa, Medulla, it's similar. Maybe this is a better example, me hesitating with my breathing as I'm talking about it. So she, I like to think of her with, she's just really breathing heavily, and her heart is almost like coming out of her chest. And I just visualize that, and it helps me remember the medulla. All right, the pons has to do with movement, coordinated movement. The reticular formation is a part of the brain that has to do with arousal. And what do we mean by arousal? We mean like literally being awake versus asleep. So if some of you are falling asleep right now, or you're having trouble staying awake in classes, maybe that is your reticular formation that isn't functioning as well as it should. The example that I like to give is and it's actually not it's a sad example. My husband, when he was in college at Maryland, he went to University of Maryland, he was walking back to his apartment one day, and he actually was, he was hit in the back of the head. They robbed him while he was walking back. And he was hit in the back of the head, and he kind of lost consciousness for a second. And that is actually where the reticular formation is. It's located kind of back here. There's another part called the cerebellum that's back there too. And that's why he kind of fell also. So in addition to losing consciousness for a second, he also did fall on the ground. So the thalamus is above it, and the thalamus is like a relay station. It's going to send messages from lower parts of the brain to higher parts of the brain, except for smell. All right, so the medulla is breathing and heartbeat. Just above the medulla is the pons, and that has to do with coordinated movements, and also it's involved with sleep as well. And then right above it, you got the reticular formation for arousal and incoming sensory information. Arousal, like we mean as in being awake or aroused. So the other thing with the reticular formation is that people that have really damaged reticular formation may be in a coma. And then The thalamus is the relay station. It takes information from lower brain structures and helps send it to higher brain structures, except for smell. And the reason why I think, this is my own little hypothesis, although I guess I should probably confirm it, but it does seem to make sense. So the thalamus is like directly behind the nose. So I think the nose can kind of just send its own information to the higher brain regions. So that's why it does not send it for smell. Damage to which of the following puts a person's life in the most danger because it may cause breathing to stop. I don't know if you're thinking of medusa. So it's medulla, C. All right. So I mentioned that there's this part called the cerebellum. Cerebellum is really important when it comes to movement and balance, nonverbal learning and memory. We're going to talk about that more in another unit. The main thing I want you to really understand for now is about coordinating movement and balance. This is my own little memory aid that I use, and I show it to my students every year. I've been doing this for, I don't know, 20 something years. Is I like to go like this, cerebellum. So just think of balancing, cerebellum. All right, so I'm just trying to stay balanced, and I say the word cerebellum while I kind of balance, and I will tell you years later, students come up to me and they'll be like, hey, Miss Jesslyn, cerebellum. All right, so moving on. All right, which structures make up the limbic system? All right, so we've started at the bottom. We had the brainstem. We had the medulla, the pons, the reticular formation, and then on the top, remember you had the thalamus, right? Now we're gonna move into another like category or part of the overall structure of the brain that consists of 4 parts. It is the limbic system, all right? Now, the limbic system, I said 4 parts here, they only have 3 listed. Sometimes they don't necessarily put the pituitary gland in here, even though it is considered part of the limbic system. So we got the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. All right, so the amygdala is specifically a part that if we were to stimulate it, you know, remember with like, we did some type of brain stimulation. We definitely, it's associated with emotion, fear, and aggression. They'll sometimes, you know, stimulate brains of cats, and they'll notice that as soon as they hit the amygdala, they'll get like either really afraid or really aggressive right at the same time. So math anxiety associated with hyperactivity in the right amygdala. Interesting. That maybe must happen to me. Another study is, they did say that they recognized that there was a link with criminal behavior and the amygdala dysfunction. Some levels of it just not activating at the right times or more often than it should. And then researchers found that when people view angry and happy faces, only the angry ones increase activity in the amygdala. Let's try it out. All right. That made me laugh. I don't know if it made you angry, but it activated that amygdala. But that was my husband. Just to let you know, I'm now getting him involved with these videos. Oh, and I guess Aggie's upset too. All right. So we have another part of the brain that is called the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is, it's got a lot of different functions. We're going to learn about them in more detail in other units, but the main functions are eating, drinking, body temperature, and then it also works with the endocrine system. You remember how I mentioned the pituitary gland, which is that I do not want to use that word again. The gland that actually activates the other glands in the endocrine system. And so one of the things, like we actually have a little mnemonic device that we also use for this sometimes too. We say the 4 F's of the hypothalamus. So one would be like F meaning food as in eating and drinking. So you got to kind of remember both. Fever as in body temperature is the other F. Fun, there's definitely like a activation of like just general pleasurable feelings. And then the other F is fornicate, because there is a part of the hypothalamus that is definitely associated with sexual feelings, sexual motivation. All right, so that is the hypothalamus. Oh, let's go back here. All right, so just here, it's motivated a rat to cross an electric grid, receiving painful shocks to reach a bar. So what does the research suggest about the functions? So it basically, what they found was that when the rat realized that all he had to do was hit this pedal to get some type of activation to the hypothalamus, he just would do it all the time. He would constantly go to the pedal and keep pushing it to receive the reward and pleasurable feelings. All right, so the hippocampus, that has to do with memory, explicit or conscious memory. So meaning like, hopefully you're remembering the stuff from this video. That would be a really good example. Facts and also events in your life. And so obviously some of the most memorable events that you've experienced in your life, you absolutely come from the activity in the hippocampus. So you guys know the expression, right? A hippo never forgets. You know that one, right? Okay, fine. I know some of you are saying, it's not a hippo, Ms. Jessel. It's an elephant. An elephant never forgets. Okay, well, fine. That's true. But a hippo never forgets is a great way to remember that hippocampuses have to do with memory. And they're kind of similar. They're both really big animals. Kind of find them in similar locations sometimes. So, all right. So I don't know. We're going to go with it. We'll see if it helps you. But there's, lots of other memory aids out there to help you. Humans that lose their hippocampus, lose their ability to form new memories. We are going to see lots of examples when we get to the memory unit of this. And survival of a brain tumor in childhood, struggle to remember new information in adulthood. NFL players who experience one or more loss of consciousness concussions may later have a shrunken hippocampus and poor memory. So, got to be careful there. Damage to the falling brain structures would affect the processing of new explicit memories. I bet you said to yourself, a hippo never forgets. Oh yeah, hippocampus. All right, so last thing here, just as a quick review, here's an example of maybe like a free response kind of question that might have to do, or you might have like part of your free response where it asks you to talk about a imaging technique. So Thomas fell and hit his head. So his parents brought him to the emergency room, which is kind of ironic because I have a son, Thomas, who actually has hit his head, and we've had to go to the emergency room. Explain the following scans would give doctors different information about the type of injury Thomas may have. All right, so when I'm looking at this real quick, I'm just going to talk out loud as if I was about to approach this free response. I know that the CT scan and the MRI are both going to be more about looking at the brain structure, like the anatomy of the brain, so I could actually see the brain tissue. And so if because of his head, it's actually damaged part of the brain and it's changed the structure of the brain, the CT scan and the MRI scan are going to show more of that. The fMRI is probably going to be the most sophisticated brain imaging technique that's going to actually be able to show the structure in addition to brain activity. So maybe asking him to answer questions and stuff, you know, how they have those baseline tests that they have people do with concussions. to kind of see their brain activity and what they're remembering and not remembering and, you know, stuff like that. And that would be where they have all those successive pictures of the brain so they can see the structure and the activity. All right, so I think look through the remainder of these slides that we do provide for you that go through and review the different parts of the brain. Here's a quick review. Oh, it's almost time for class. All right, so, you know, my videos that I make are not perfect. I'm even thinking back of maybe I might have made a couple mistakes there. So I will always make sure to clarify. But I think overall, hopefully just spending a little time watching these videos, it is helpful. And then you just answer the questions that go with it on the Google Forms. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care. Bye. Oh, click out of here. Bye. We'll see ya. Have a great day.